So this is actually a sort of, I'm going to do a bit of a riff on a talk that I actually gave at All Things Open last fall, which is automating the IoT with BPMN. And the subtext is always, why would you do that? So why would anyone want to do that? It really is automating automation, right? Because IoT is basically automation, and I'm going to automate that. And that is rather meta. But it's business automation of IoT, not the actual engineering automation, right? So it's actually layering, putting a layer of automation on top of IoT that business people can deal with, rather than having engineers actually, putting devices out there. And trust me, I will point the camera down and let you see my desktop in all its embarrassment. It is absolutely covered with microcontrollers and sensors and all sorts of stuff. So quick, how it started for me. I've been doing IoT since about 2004. This current job, I was told flat out, this is not an IoT position. Also, this is not an IoT company. And I was like, great, I won't do IoT. And then people kept bringing up IoT to me because they'd look at my background, and every time I'd meet with one of the executives, they'd say, hey, about this IoT thing. Don't encourage me. I have a t-shirt that my wife gave me that says, in my defense, I was left unsupervised. And that's never a good thing with me. So here's the deal. I came up with this project to automate a greenhouse. And I was working on that project when I put the response into All Things Open, and I planned to talk about that project. But by the time I got to All Things Open, I hadn't finished the greenhouse project, so I kind of made a pivot. I finished the greenhouse project, and so I'm kind of going to show you both things that I was talking about at All Things Open. So just a little bit of background. Greenhouses are almost $1 billion smart greenhouses, not just greenhouses, but smart greenhouses are almost $1 billion in 2018. And that's going up rapidly, especially as more states legalize marijuana. Growing it becomes big business, it gets huge, right? So that's pretty much all I talked about the greenhouse at that point, right? I have a better demo that dispenses Skittles, which I built for a friend of mine so that I could send him Skittles anytime he was very ill, and I could send him Skittles from anywhere. I could just push a button and he would get Skittles. So it all came because my very first assignment at Camunda was to do something fun to show off BPMN for Halloween. I'd only been at the company for a week, and I didn't know anything about really anything that BPMN was about. So, write about what you know. So hammer, nail, I of course did an IoT project. And it was in the midst of, this was fall of 2019. So we were right in the middle of COVID. Nobody wants to talk to people face to face. It was Halloween. Again, let's take IoT and automate Halloween, right? I didn't know anything. I had to do it really quick, so it had to be pretty simple. So I wrote it in Go, most of it in Go, just because I've been writing a lot of Go, and it's easy for me to do the kind of things that I tend to need to do for IoT in Go. So that's what we did. The basic idea was a kid rings a doorbell, and the doorbell takes a picture of them, and it submits that picture to a business process management process. And then you can go evaluate the picture on a bunch of different criteria, and it dispenses candy depending on how that costume is. And so prepare yourself for the doorbell in question. This is the doorbell that I built. It's not pretty, but if I actually take a picture with it, it will take a picture and submit it. So that was build this thing that will take a picture, build a candy dispenser, automate the whole thing, right? And VC funding, and next thing you know, I'm rich. Right, that's not exactly what happened, but I just happen to have all this stuff lying around. If you can see over here, I have this giant tool chest, which is literally full to the gills with stuff. So I needed this ESP32 cam, a little push button, a couple of LEDs. For the candy dispenser, I needed another ESP8266, a stepper motor, and a stepper driver. All of it I had, but as you can see from the cost, it really didn't cost me much, right? And those are actually the drawers of my cabinet over there opened. It is literally chock full of stuff, right? So I came up with this schematic for the doorbell. First of all, never start with hardware, but I'll skip over that. And then that's what I built. So I got pretty spot on, I'd say, right? The candy dispenser was a little harder. So I built this, this schematic. I use Fritzings to do the schematics. And then I built it, and yeah, pretty much nailed that. But it does look a little awkward once I get the candy dispenser on it. I am terrible at 3D CAD. So I went out and found a dog treat dispenser and copied it to be a candy dispenser and printed it, and yeah, awkward. So let's get to the BPMN. I built this kind of long, complicated process, right? So the picture comes in and a person goes and evaluates the picture and says, yeah, this is a picture of a person, right? If it's not a picture of a person, no candy, and the process ends. And then they submit that, and then they go back and they decide, okay, how old is this person? And if they're, what age range do they fall in? And then do they have a good costume? So it's a bunch of different processes that take sort of human intervention. So I think this will play. Nope, didn't play. I'm trying to go back. So nobody was coming to our house. So I actually turned it back into a dog treat dispenser, and we tried it with my dogs. And that's my dog, Bruno, who I'm surprised isn't in here harassing me. And oh, it's gonna play. Here it is. So for now, I'm just gonna have to see my dog. Picture taken. It's off processing Camunda. See the picture there, so I'll play that. The picture that was taken. And so next thing I'll do, since I can't use it as a clickable link, is I'll open it up in its own file. Look how easy it is. So he's wearing a costume. So I have to get that. Let's see, I think we'll see it again, but I don't really need to. So I can play it and put this costume. This is cool costume. So I complete that task. And then the next one that pops up is to estimate his age. I know his age. He's under 5 years. Complete that task and see that's a bunch of trees. All of that is open. So, yes, my kids look weird. That's really was the whole process. But as you could see, I kept having to go in and claim this process and do a thing, and then claim this process and then do a thing. Dogs are acceptable stand-ins for kids. Those are my 2 dogs. The other one was not a good test subject for this because she's too eager with food, and she just tried to eat the treat dispenser. Because there were treats in it. So I decided I could make this a little better, and started, most of the decisions that I had were actually coded into the model, and that's a terrible idea. But at the time I didn't really know any better. So that's what I did, but don't do that. So there was also too much human interaction. And what I wanted to do was remove some of the human interaction so that it could be a faster and easier to deal with process. So I collapsed the model, and now there's only one human task, and all the decisions are automated with DMN, which is decision tables. And so I only have to intervene once, and then all the decisions are made in the decision tables, and then you either get candy or you don't. So using DMN is actually a really good way to automate decisions, because I can even nest tables. So I can take the age and the costume rating, and I can determine how many Skittles they get based on that. And then I can feed that back into the upper process. And if it's not a costume, then I don't even have to drop into those lower decisions. So if we move the goalposts just a little bit, I could actually automate the whole process where I didn't have to go in and do any kind of evaluation at all, right? Picture's taken and candy comes out. And so that's what I decided to do. There are now no human tasks in here, and there's a single decision table. So picture comes in, it's evaluated in the decision table, and then candy comes out or not. And I don't even have to be home for Halloween anymore. I can set this thing up and away we go, right? But it's not actually a single decision table. It's 4 different decision tables that feed back into a larger one. And I know you're going, what? Anger, sorrow, surprise, and joy. What does that have to do with Halloween costumes? And that's the moving the goalposts part. What I decided to do was actually have the picture evaluated by Google's image processing AI service, and make some decisions based on that. So based on the anger or sorrow or surprise or joy, which are the 4 things that Google tells you about, based on those things, we'll dispense Skittles, right? And again, I used Google's image processing. I wrote the whole thing in Go. I pulled out the emotions from that image processing return and dispensed Skittles. Now, this is all talk and no demo. I have to apologize, because this week was the week that all of my SSL certs had to be renewed, and they're scattered across a bunch of different stuff. And so my demo doesn't actually work right now because I forgot to update it in like 3 different places that it needs to be updated. So what I'm going to do is, well, first of all, I have to show you this because that's my mom. My mom was a world-class computer scientist back in her day, and she used to say this to me all the time. So what I'm going to do is we're going to leave this presentation, and I'm going to share a different screen. If I can find it. I gave people at All Things Open a seriously bad anxiety attack when I showed them my entire desktop, and I don't want to do that to you because it's really a frightening thing. So what I really want to do is just show you the app that I'm interested in, but I can't find it. So hide your eyes, take your Xanax, whatever it's going to take to make this happen for you. So we're going to go into the business process management application, and we'll start out with, this was my first diagram. Can everybody see that okay? I can embiggen it some. So the picture was taken and somebody had to come in and actually, this was a human task, evaluate the picture. If it was not wearing a costume, no candy, right? And then there's this little script task that added one piece of candy to the candy bag. And then I had to go back in and rate the costume. If it was a terrible costume, they got none. If it was just okay, they got one more. If it was a great costume, they got two more. And then I had to go back in, another task, estimate the age, right? And if you're over 15 years old, you should get a job and buy your own candy, and you got no candy, and that was it. And then in the end, it added up all the candy and dispensed candy via an MQTT broker that went to the Skittles dispenser, right? And I thought that was, at the time, that was my very first one, and it was great and it worked fine. But then I came back and decided to do a better version. Whoop. Here it is. Where I only had to evaluate the picture once, and then I could have the decisions made in a decision table, and that decided whether you got any candy or candy dispensed. And I can even go in and show you the decision tables. But before I do that, I'll go in and show you the automated process. You'll notice there's just this one decision table, and you can tell that it's got the little table up here that evaluates the picture and does all of the decisions. And then you either get Skittles or no candy and you're done. And so again, as I said, I didn't even have to participate in this. And it was great fun to actually do this. Now, one of the things, I'm not sure if I have any history. I can run some history on this, and I can see how many. 6 completed, only 2 people didn't get candy, and 4 out of the 6 got candy. Now, this is actually one of our enterprise features, being able to see all this history and see what's going on, right? So since I can't give you a demo of this, which is really sad, and I'm really upset about it, I'm very sorry. I will also go through the greenhouse project. Now, let me see if I can let you see. You probably can't see that very well. I'm supposed to have a camera over there, but that camera is not working. So I have a small greenhouse on my table over there. And in that greenhouse, I have a bunch of sensors. I have a CO2 sensor, a temperature sensor, and a water sensor for the plant in there. And I am collecting a ton of data on it. This is ongoing. This is the CO2. You can see the CO2 is actually starting to trend up, probably because I'm talking so much. The soil moisture, this is only the past hour, but I can show you the past 12 hours, and you can see where I decided to water the plant this morning. And you can see where the temperature started to go up because I turned a light on over it. And all this other activity. This is actually when I came into the office. And so I started breathing, right? And what I did for this was I created an unbelievably complicated process to manage this greenhouse. Yeah, right? Does that give you anxiety? It gives me anxiety. So what I've done here, I've got a temperature monitor, a CO2 monitor, a humidity monitor, a soil moisture monitor, and then I've got some actual controls over there. I've got a vent opener that I can open and close a little vent. I've got a fan control so I can turn on and off a small fan, and I've got a pump that I can turn on and off to actually pump water into the plant. So what happens is on a regular basis, this timer kicks off because I'm going to grow something, and it kicks off these 4 monitors, which go out and get that data from the IoT database that we just saw here. It gets the last 5-minute average, and if the temperature is too low, it kicks off something. If it's too high, or it's okay, and those all feed into these other processes so that I can kick off a process and it goes and gets all the data, and then it decides, okay, well, it's really hot and the CO2 is really high, so we need to open the vent all the way and turn the fan on. And by the way, the plant's dry, so we need to turn the pump on and water the plant. And the point of all this as a business process management was that it doesn't take any engineering to change this process, right? As a business process owner, if I decide that I'm going to grow a different crop, which has different parameters, I can just go in and I can change the parameters for each of these processes, and that will automatically change how the greenhouse is managed. Let's say that the crop I'm growing now likes high CO2. So I adjust the CO2 level alarms to be in the range that that plant likes. And then next season, I'm growing a different crop in there and it likes very low CO2 levels. So I just go into this business process and I change the triggers here, and I can then tell the greenhouse will just automatically start operating on those new parameters. And I don't have to have an engineer go in and adjust all the stuff on the server or adjust the devices or anything like that. As the business owner, I'm automating the automation that's going on in the greenhouse. Does that make sense? I see that there are some questions. I'm happy to answer them if anybody wants to speak up. And again, I am truly sorry that my live demo is not working. I always do demos and I always fly by the seat of my pants, and generally they work. And it just so happened that certificates expired on Sunday and I've been slowly updating them, but I haven't gotten them everywhere.
David,
is, of course, one of the, go ahead.
Sorry. This is Todd. So what we'll have to do regarding questions and comments and things like that is just ask people to put those in the chat stream or in the Q&A feature. And again, you'll see those there at the bottom of your screen, everyone that's participating today. But try to direct questions over in Q&A. That will help keep them, help us keep them somewhat separated from just the general chat stream. Comments in chat have a tendency to stack, and then once they stack, they can get lost. It becomes a challenge to extract some of those out, to identify them and to extract them out. So anyway, but and then there is the raise your hand feature in Zoom webinars, and anyone that's done Zoom webinars knows you can sort of raise your hand, and if we see someone's hand raised, we can sort of recognize you and we can enable your microphone, your audio. We don't typically do that on these meetups, just in the interest of time. But today we do have a time for, let's see, it's 12:51, so we got time for about 5 minutes of questions or comments or things like that. So
I did tell you I would show you what a mess my desk was. I have this stuff all over the place. This is actually a thermal camera that I built for my wife's office, which had a little display, and they put it up during COVID, and anybody that walked through the door, the people behind the desk could see immediately what their temperature was and decide whether or not to kick them out. Of course, here's my camera. It's my desk is always like this. No matter how often I clean it, it ends up this way. It drives everybody in my family completely bonkers. So,
David, I doubt we have anyone participating today that can relate to that, right? No, right? No, I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. Okay, so let's see, David, if you can see the Q&A stream, if you can pull that up. I think Tom has a question. How could you add a soil hygrometer sensor for watering? Yes, or you could add.
So in fact, over there is a soil hygrometer that is measuring the soil moisture. It's a tiny little plant because I only bought this little desktop bread box size greenhouse because I couldn't convince my boss to spend the $800 to put a greenhouse in my side yard, which would have been really fun. But she was like, yeah, let's just see if this works first. So I have this tiny little plant and I have this giant soil moisture sensor stuff down in it. I have another one around here somewhere that's actually got a water pump attached to it. So you put it in the plant and it's got a water, and you put one hose into a bucket of water and the other hose into the plant, and hook it to a monitoring software, and it'll do the whole thing for you. I was using this small pump that I have here. I don't know where I got it, but it turns out for water in that small, tiny little plant, I could only turn the pump on for about a second, and that would even overrun the plant. It's a very, very efficient little pump, and it would just pump way too much water in there. That's why it's out right now, because it was getting close to swamping the electronics with water, which, water and small electronics don't mix well. I did learn a lesson about conformant coatings. So I now coat most things that will be anywhere but, warm and dry inside, so that they don't get affected by water.
All right, very cool. Let's see, if anyone else has questions, please let us know. I don't see any more over in Q&A. Okay, yeah, David did answer that question. Okay, so David, I've been scanning chat. I'm not seeing any direct questions. Let's see, unless I've just missed one. So if someone has put a question or has a question, you can pose it over in chat. We'll scan, try to make sure that we get that posed to David. And then I'm scanning Q&A again, and I'm not seeing anything. So, which is fine. Okay. So with all that said, let's see. Okay. So if you all, again, if you do have a question between now and over the next 5 minutes or so, please let us know. David, any final, comments, any parting words? Thank you very much for the presentation. We truly appreciate that.
So my only sort of final comment is that I was sort of skeptical a lot in the beginning of what I could possibly do with business process management. And one of the things that I have discovered is that one of the great things about it is the resiliency that it adds to processes, right? So previously I would just write a little Go server that would handle everything. But if that Go server went down and didn't restart, then there was no way to recapture what was going on, right? Anything that I missed in that time. And what I've started doing is all of my processes and things that I run, I now submit to my Camunda engine, and they then submit jobs out to these Go processes. But if the Go process has died, it stays active in the Camunda engine. And if I then go back and restart the Go process or whatever external process I'm running, then that process then continues from that point. And so I don't lose any of that history. I don't lose any interaction if the server goes down. As long as the Camunda server is still up, it will basically just hold on to all that stuff and wait. And I've had this happen where I had a job that was stuck, and when I finally went and restarted it, an entire week's worth of jobs ran through the Camunda engine all at once, because I finally restarted the server process that was actually going to handle that task. So it's really good for that resiliency and those sorts of things. It's also really good for me to spend the time to map out these processes. It's like a mental exercise to see what are all the steps I need to do, right? And can I break them up into more steps? Can I automate any of those steps? Do I have to write a service? Do I have to call an external service? What do I have to do to make each one of those steps happen, right? And that, it turns out, is both a really good exercise mentally to map out all your processes, but it's also really good for breaking things up. And then I can do each one of these things in small pieces and bring it all together as one big project. So that's what I will say. And Camunda is absolutely phenomenal at this. It's really easy to write these processes, to diagram these processes, and then to deploy them.